Hello everyone, and welcome to the first in a new series focusing on the characters that make up the stories we love. No matter how you define a character, it's pretty reasonable that you won't have much of a story without them. To that end, we may eventually begin bending the rules a little bit as to what counts as a character. But at the heart of this little tangential series is to focus on the individuals, the bespoke identities, the elements of a story that elicit a sense of sonder. Specifically, I'll be focusing on two criteria when considering candidates for this list. Are they a character I feel has a compelling or empathy-worthy story, and do I feel like they deserve more attention? We all love our respective Clouds and Wolverines and Thanoses and Sailor Moons and Kefkas and Batmans and Lynx and Finn and Jakeses and Ruby Roses and Rita Repulsas. Some really great content creators have made some really great videos about them already. I'm looking to use this series to highlight some lesser known but no less deserving characters. To start, I've selected one of my favorite characters with one of my favorite stories from one of my favorite games. Their story is one of generational expectation, self-discovery, and what it means to truly be a part of your community and give back.
Quand nous chanterons les tombes des cerises et Guérassigno et Merlin moqueur seront tous en fête.
Ada-1, the vendor from Destiny 2, located in the lower Annex area, where lately she's been helping keep an eye on Archie during the holidays. Realistically, though, her journey has been quite the roller coaster, starting with some of the earliest first-hand accounts of the collapse and resulting Dark Age. As Banshee44 points out, the 1 designation after her name conveys that she has never been reset, meaning she retains all of her memories since she was brought online during the very first days of the collapse. Despite being a prodigious weaponsmith, Ada-1 is largely a non-combatant. She turns to us for field testing, but there is little hiding her excitement to be working on the challenges in her weapons labs again. As we gain her trust, and she becomes more directly involved in the defense of the Last City, she also begins to learn about how to grow as a person, and how to leave behind the baggage of the past without letting go of her memories and their warmth. This journey is not an easy one for her though, and only progresses as she opens herself up to the many friends she finds herself surrounded by. We meet Ada through our connections with Spider. There was a batch of gear tainted with infused Elixir tech coming out of the EDZ, and we went to see him about it. It turned out someone had gained access to a Golden Age facility belonging to the Black Armory, a facility that a rather secretive and protective resident of the tower would find most interesting. Our token of Spider's reference proved enough to get us past the front door, but it did little to allay the hatred felt against Guardians by the tenant here. A quick brag about their gear was all that would suffice as a greeting before being explicit in why she hates Lightbearers. They murdered the founder of the Black Armory
Stunning, isn't it? That weapon is beyond special. A witness to the slaughter of our founder. And my ally in vengeance against those responsible. Light bearers. Just like you. You are not welcome here, Guardian. I see. Well then, what we offer, Guardian, is privilege. Normally afforded to those who do not already have their own. Today, however, it would seem our doors are open to you. Welcome to the Black Armory.
Our story starts with the journals of Ada's mother, Henriette Mayrin. A citizen of the Golden Age, she felt a disconcerting unease in the comfort provided by the traveler. Humanity had long ago created the Warmind network, ultimately handing over their defense to its automation. If forced to put her trust in an array of supercomputers and an unknowable ball in the sky, she would instead put the power back in her own hands. Henriette figured, if the traveler had been out there all this time, with humanity ignorant to its ability to affect the fabric of the universe on a grandiose scale, what else were they ignorant to? Was there something out there that was its equal and opposite? Henriette would not trust the safety of her daughter to a protector she could not understand. Henriette was not alone in this fear, it turns out, and she used her vast connections and resources to create the Black Armory. At its core and by her side were Helga Rasmussen and Yuki Saito. These three would form a bond as tight as sisters, despite, and in part of, their vocal and heated differences in opinion. One such example of disagreement was a proposal Helga made regarding the creation of a Black Armory mobile forge platform in the form of an exo. The exos were a recent development from Braytech, Helga's former employer, so she was familiar with their capabilities and believed they could be incorporated into the Armory's mission while keeping Braytech's notorious over-involvement to a minimum. With the support of Yuki, Henriette ultimately went along with the project, and progress began in earnest. Project Niobe, with the Obsidian Accelerator, set to create a walking, talking forge. Unfortunately, before the exo could be entirely completed and have a consciousness uploaded to it, catastrophe struck. Henriette's worst fears were realized the night a horrific pounding was heard on the main doors. The ensuing battle was intense. They were a weapons foundry after all. But in the end, they were no match for the forces of the darkness. Helga was killed alongside several other members of their foundry family. So too was Adelaide, mortally wounded. Recovery efforts were made, but in the chaos of the collapse, there was nothing they could do. Against Henriette's own rationale and reasoning, she reached for a last-ditch attempt to save her child in any way possible. She uploaded her child's consciousness to the exo frame before she was lost completely. As they ran from the facility, their defense turned from fighting the creatures of the darkness to a monster of a whole new making. A monster of light. The Risen looked human, but they possessed strange feats, most dangerously that of resurrection. These new beings fought against their own risen kind and preyed on the survivors, hoarding resources and creating roving gangs. During those few times of quiet, the Exo would ask questions of the world around them, and Henriette would do her best to avoid anything too painful. She wrestled with her feelings over her decision to extend her daughter's life artificially, and struggled even more with keeping this from the Exo. Whether by natural connection or encouraged by the rest of the traveling party, the Exo seemed to gravitate to Henriette for her more profound and philosophical questions. One day, Henriette recounts the time Ada-1 asked about a car that was on fire, inquiring if it was still alive and could be repaired. Before Henriette realized the implications of her answer, she reflexively responded that the car was a different type of machine and was never alive. On the flip side, however, we're treated to a much different scene, however brief in time, where Ada-1 is allowed to play with some children at a survivors camp. Playing hide-and-seek, Henriette laments, is a useful skill the Exo will need to be practiced in after all. Not only does Ada seem to take to playing with the other children well, they also seem to treat her normally as well. The ugly reality of the Dark Age rears its head all too quickly, however, as their many skirmishes with the Risen have brought attention to the Armory's weapons. The group is assaulted at camp one day, and Yuki sacrifices herself in an attempt to buy the rest of the group time to escape. Throughout the days, it becomes just Henriette and Ada-1 traveling together. However, Henriette finally gives way after relentless and brutal pursuit by the Risen, removing the obsidian accelerator that allows Ada to operate as a forge, and sends the Exo away. The final entry of the Black Armory papers details this moment. Final entry. Dear Adelaide, when those people and their drones found me alone at that deserted intersection, they demanded to know where you were. I offered them the obsidian accelerator. I gave it freely. You promised you would leave me, and you did. But you never said how far you would go, did you? You stayed close enough to watch through your scope. As the man took aim at my head, I heard the shot and assumed I was dead. But it was him who was dead, not me. You were so far that none of us knew where to look. The second man winged me with one of our own weapons. He began to gloat about that, but another round from you shut him up. 2 more thunderous shots, and their drones were as dead as they were. I saw the glare from your scope disappear. and I knew you were heading away. I know you must feel guilty, but don't. It was I who wronged you. I grabbed the accelerator and got as far from the shouts of the aggressors as I could. They've been on my tail. By now, you're long gone, and I've led those people back inland. Despite Ada staying close enough to neutralize Henriette's attackers and their ghosts, Ada did eventually leave to be on her own, carrying the weight of blood-soaked baggage. Don't trust the Risen.
The spider. How well do you know our mutual friend? Not well enough, I'm sure.
It wasn't until the discovery of the Black Armory papers, in fact, the final entry, presented to her by a guardian, a light bearer, a Risen, that she begins to shift her understanding of her world. That day, she learned many things. She learned that her Foundry family wasn't just a found family. Henriette had literally been her mother. The woman to whom she could attribute a vast majority of her life lessons to hadn't just been a matronly figure to her, but had in fact been her very real silent mother. The horrors of the collapse and following Dark Age had trained her to be tough and defensive. But if she wanted to move past those nightmares, she would have to open herself up to that change. Risen had indeed taken her family from her, but a guardian had brought her legacy back to her. In time, Ada began partnering with the Vanguard, assisting with upgrading their armaments and tactical initiatives. We even see her begin to be folded into the upper echelon of Vanguard operations, joining with the future war cult in an effort known as Project Stronghold.
I have never put faith in the Traveler, but I am starting to trust in its guardians.
With the return of the Pyramid Fleet and its forces, the forges were destroyed. And Ada is once again forced to watch as the Black Armory ultimately isn't enough to stop the tide of darkness sweeping through the system. As a result, her frustration and loss could be heard clanging out through the halls in a sporadic echo. Hawthorne was the first to reach out, in the guise of complaining about a noisy neighbor. Their friendship was a rocky one, but Soraya's bluntness in questioning the purpose behind Black Armory turned out to be just what Ada needed. And it is here I want to share the final portion of Henriette's final entry of the Black Armory papers. No longer recounting the events of her story, she switches to address Adelaide directly. The end of my story is close, as it probably should be. So I guess it's time I tell you a few things about, well, you. The end of your life should have followed its natural trajectory. I'm ashamed I changed it for selfish reasons. Does the name Adelaide bring you any flicker of recognition? It is your birth name, and you heard it every day of your life until the day I sent you, without your consent, into a new world. You became Ada-1 when I robbed you of your end. I've loved you since before you were born, and in trying to give you everything, perhaps I've robbed you of a final human experience, a dignified death. I know I will not see you again. If you want to know about your past, know that you were born a second time in the Niobe labs. When you were wounded at the labs and I saw you were losing your fight, I did what I always do when the chips were down. I created something. You, Ada-1. From what I had almost completely lost. I did it out of fear of losing you forever. I charted the course of your life and made decisions that were yours to make, not mine. I hope you find it in your heart to forgive me for that. I was naive, looked too often to the past. I just couldn't let any of it go. I never did have much respect for the natural order of things. And Helga, well, she was the opposite of me. She only wanted to grow the Armory, to see its full potential. And Yuki helped make that vision possible. The two of them spent as much time looking ahead as I did looking back. I realize now that there's a balance to life. You look backward a little, you look forward a little. But most importantly, you live in the here and now. You appreciate what you have because you never know when it'll all be snatched from you. Learn from our successes and our missteps. Be bold. Do not fear the future. Respect the past and never forget where you came from. And try to never fear death, if you can help it. I know I don't anymore. You know what's funny? I never considered how lucky I was for the time we had together. The envy of all the mothers who ever lived. I got to love you twice. Your mother, Henriette.
Mother, if you're watching, I hope you know I'm doing everything I can.
It's inarguable that the environment and people that nurture us during our early years provide influence for who we turn out to be. However, as conscious beings, we must always be critical of ourselves and the weight of what we carry. Henriette was certainly a figure of fiery passion, wholly dedicated to her beliefs. But she also relented to dissent when reasoned with. We see as much in her journals during the founding of Black Armory. She trusted her sisters. She absolutely would not want Ada, her daughter, to still be carrying her grudge all these centuries later. The point was to be wary, not to be prejudiced. And in this journey of leaving her grudges behind, she discovers new ways to connect with her legacy that she had never considered before.
The founders of the Black Armory were visionaries, inventors. If the Armory is going to survive, I must be the same.
Ada begins exploring out into the tower more, engaging with her fellow vendors and even seeking counsel and friendship from those she once feared. Ava recounts a time Ada approached her booth and they spoke of design patterns. Even on a business side, we see Ada joining Shaxx in negotiations with the other weapons foundries on behalf of his brave arsenal. With the discovery of inert Siva, she even helps the player guardian reobtain a relic of their past. By studying simulations of VIP 2014 in battle, she is able to reproduce and even alter what would come to be known as Outbreak Perfected. There are two moments we get, though, that I think deserve special focus, though edited for brevity. In the first, Ada is seeking information regarding her foundry's history, and knowing that Helga Rasmussen used to work for Braytech, she reaches out to Ido, who lived for a time on Europa amongst the Braytech facilities. Unfortunately, Ido doesn't have the exact information that Ada is looking for, but offers some counsel and even a separate lead for her to follow. Ido cocked her head and observed the exo. Such despair. Maybe this is about more than guns after all? Ada paused briefly. I lost something. A part of me. My whole existence was tied to the armory, to those forges. Without them, I feel... Ada shook her head. This isn't... I'm not sure you could understand. Ido chuckled, a guttural grunt combined with clicking teeth. Our history is littered with the banners of lost houses. Most of us have worn more than one color, knelt before kell after kell, hoping that they would be the last. She leaned closer to Ada. Elixni understand the fluidity of purpose very well. Clicks resonated in Ido's jaw. Devil's was a dead house until Aramis made it new. Mithrax was dusk, and now he is light. Paths only end when we stop walking. Ada studied the Elixni. This is not the conversation I was expecting. If this settlement is going to work, it's probably best to break from old expectations, Ido said. Ada nodded and looked at the light softly radiating through the window, and confidently extended her arm with sincere gratitude. The clawed hand landed softly on her shoulder as the Elixni instead thrust her datapad into Ada's outstretched hand. The befuddled exo quickly parsed the screen. Are you sure it's a good idea to give me this? How will it look to your allies, you helping me like this? Ido chittered. It will look like unity. In our second moment of community connection, we see Ada in almost the opposite role. She has learned of a different Elixni, one whose violent past often brings them into conflict with their current hosts, the survivors in the last city. The last exo of note that confronted him spat back his previously chosen name, the only time we've ever heard it. The butcher known as Achilles, reborn as Namrask, the Weaver. And now, Ada-1 has invited him to meet with her. Why? Namrask begins, mustering his nerve. Why did you invite me here? Ido tells me you are a weaver. I am, he says, and then, almost inaudibly, no. He bows his head in silence and shame. Ada says nothing for a moment, then turns to glance wistfully at the loom. When the Black Armory's forges were lost, I felt that I no longer knew who I was. And so I had to reinvent myself. She leaves his side, opening a drawer in her desk and taking from it an object wrapped in cloth. Here, she says as she hands it to him, for you to practice. Namrask unwraps the parcel, staring wide-eyed at the synthweave bolt in his hands. From one weaver to another, Ada says kindly. It's interesting to note the way in which Ada chooses to relate to Namrask. It's almost certain that she's aware of his history, given her high status with the Vanguard, and her history of having, unfortunately, been directly paired with Lakshmi II during the FWC leader's most paranoid moments. In this context, her choice to relate her history of connection to the weapons foundry as an identity seems a part of reaching out to empathize with Namrask. Instead of holding on to the grudges of her past as Lakshmi did, Ada chose to offer grace instead. Grace to make choices in the moment and live a life that brings honor to our real foundations. The Elixni were a proud people because they lived in a great society that benefited each other, not because they were a ruthless race of vengeance.
I never imagined life without the forges, but I suppose they're still here, the foundation for the loom's technology. I once believed the forges could be our future, but I was wrong. They were just a step on the path, and now we walk on.
What does it mean to honor those who came before you? There has to be more to carrying a thought forward than simply the ties it holds for us. If the only reason you're carrying the torch for a festering thought is that it burned brightly in someone you love, that's not doing honor to either that ideal or your loved one. To truly hold an ideal you respect, you have to understand it. And to understand a belief, one must study its foundations and learn how it holds its shape. Presenting a belief on an emotional argument is like placing a cornerstone in shifting sand. No one shares your emotional ties like you do, and thus any argument is easily washed away by something that is more relatable than you. Ada has chosen to step back from the day-to-day march of surviving trauma, taking a moment to breathe and assess the world as it is now. And is finding ways to move forward in a way that seems to fill her with more pride and purpose than any backstreet weapons dealing ever had. Ava Levante has worked with Ada on more than one occasion and readily admits to admiring Ada's courage in reconciliation. Banshee 44 flips between talking shop and philosophy with Ada like he does anyone else, but she seems to keep up in a way that no one else can. And if friendship is truly embodied by hard-forged trust, mutual respect, and grown-worthy nicknames, there really can be no better evidence for Ada's place amongst the citizens of the last city than her own words in the lore tab titled Ada-1. Ada folds her arms behind her back. "This festival of yours is new to me," she says. "But the Black Armory has always been a celebration of history, of tradition, of memory. This seems much the same." She nods. "Thank you for welcoming me into your city's festivities, Guardian." That's about where we'll end things, Guardians. Thank you for staying to hear about a futuristic weaponsmith at odds with the story's hero, who grew to be a pillar of their community. Hopefully, we've inspired you to take a bit of a closer look at some of your beloved story's lesser-known characters. Thanks again for hanging out. Have a good one.